The West Devon Audit Committee. Oh, thank you. Thanks for the reminder. I was reminding Councillor Edmonds earlier on, so it is catching, yeah. Welcome to the West Devon Audit Committee on Tuesday, the 6th of September 2022. I'm the chairman, Councillor Ball. We'll go through the agenda. Any apologies for absence?
We have no apologies, Chair. Thank you.
I'm aware that Councillor Samuel is unable to attend in person, but she said she was going to try and log on remotely. But that's the only one I've been aware of. Members, please do.
Sorry to interrupt by the very beginning. I do notice that we have actually had all the numbers for audits from members without apologies. Is it something that we can follow up somehow to make sure members are, it's quite key that they are here for the audit committee meeting. And only have to have 3 members of the committee here.
Yeah,
it's quite poor, really. So we, whether it's yourself as chairman or the leader of the council, send a message out to all members, just especially the importance of sending apology through the meetings.
I think that's a very good point, Vice Chair. I'll chat with the leader afterwards if everybody's okay with that, and we'll come up with a contingency plan. Leader, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Deputy Chair, for raising that. I share your concerns. This is a very serious function that this committee carries out, and it's disappointing that the numbers of members present aren't dwindling, as you said. So I will certainly revisit that and make people's responsibilities clear to them. So I'm grateful to you for raising it.
Thank you. I'm happy to leave it with yourself, Councillor Jory. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, well, we turn to the agenda. Declarations of interest. Members, I'm sure I don't need to read it out. You're very familiar with the protocol. If anything comes up during the meeting that you need to declare interest, just indicate, and I'll give you the opportunity to record that. Items requiring urgent attention. Kathy, are you aware of anything? I'm not aware of anything.
Not that I'm aware of, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Confirmation of minutes for the meeting, the 5th of July. We'll go through the minutes page by page. So page 1. Please shout out if there's anything that you wish to point out. Page 2. And page 3. Members are happy. I'd like to propose that they're an accurate record of the previous meeting. Would somebody like to second that, please? Councillor Yellen, thank you. Just vote on that. Thank you very much. That's carried. Great. I will sign that at the end of the meeting. Thank you. Okay, so on to item agenda 5. And I suspect this will be the substantial part of our meeting today. It's the draft statement of accounts and draft annual governance statement for financial year 21-22. And Councillor Edmonds, I believe you're introducing this for us.
Yes, Chair, I am indeed. Thank you. The report asks the Audit Committee to note the draft statement of accounts and the draft annual governance statement for the financial year ended the 31st of March 2022. The accounts reflect another challenging year for the Council as it emerged from a global pandemic and met the challenge of supporting the Homes for Ukraine scheme. Despite these challenges, the report confirms that a revenue budget underspend of £196,000 was generated in 2021-22, which was transferred to unearmarked reserves in accordance with normal accounting practice. The main variations from budget are shown on page 9 of the narrative statement or page 19 of your agenda papers. Key to the authority's financial resilience are its reserves, which are at a prudent level, with balances of both unearmarked and earmarked reserves increasing during the year. As of the 31st of March 22, the council held £9.189 million in earmarked and £1.49 million in unearmarked reserves. Approximately £1.63 million of earmarked reserves is due to a technical accounting adjustment on business rates and is not money which is available to the council to spend. Turning now to the annual governance statement, Appendix B contains details of the council's annual self-assessment of its compliance with the 7 core principles of good governance, together with an action plan setting out arrangements to secure continuous improvement in the areas identified from the council's system of internal controls. The accounts are currently being audited by Grant Thornton, and on completion, the statement of accounts will be brought back to the audit committee for approval in November, alongside Grant Thornton's external audit report. So, Chair, as we reflect on the outputs of another challenging financial year, I'm reassured by Mrs. Buckle's comments in the narrative statement that the financial standing of the council is secure in the immediate future, but acknowledges that there is still much work to do to ensure the long-term financial sustainability of the council. So finally, Chair, I'd like to thank Mrs. Buckle and the head of finance practice, Mrs. Henstock, and indeed all members of the finance team for their continued prudent and robust management of the council's finances. And I think Mr. Murray from Grant Thornton may be on the call. And if he is, perhaps I can invite Mr. Murray perhaps to give us a brief update on progress with the ongoing audit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Mr. Murray, are you there, and would you like to make any comments?
I am indeed. So through you, Chair, thanks everybody. Good afternoon. Sorry I couldn't be with you in person today. So brief summary of audit progress. We started following receipt of the draft accounts. So progress is in summary going well. We're still on track in terms of our delivery timetable. It's myself today remotely because my colleague Ollie, who is the audit manager who you've met previously, his wife actually gave birth on Sunday, which is lovely news, but has meant a quick diary shuffle for myself. And I'll be obviously picking up some of his responsibilities over the next couple of weeks. In respect of, excuse me, the West Devon draft financial statements, the one area that we've been looking at in some detail and discussing with finance colleagues and ultimately, which I believe will lead to an adjustment from the draft accounts in front of you today, is in respect of depreciation charges for some of the building assets that the council owns and the related revaluation adjustments to those. I won't go through this in full detail today because, as was recognised in the introduction, our audit findings report will set out all of the findings from our audit, along with any adjustments from the draft accounts that you see in front of you today. Our intention is that comes to you in November, which is in accordance with the updated timetable for 21-22 local government financial statements, which seeks for audited financial statements to be published by the council by the end of November, or a statement as to why an audit is still ongoing. So the depreciation area has taken up a bit of time, but I think we're now in agreement with finance team of some of the adjustments that need to go through that. Importantly, for your kind of information and assurance, the depreciation charge does not have an impact on the usable reserves of the council, so that the monies that are available to use. There are statutory overrides in place which move those accounting entries to unusable reserves. So although there will be an adjustment to this area, that doesn't impact on the usable reserves of the council or ultimately the council taxpayer of West Devon. Other than that, there's various elements of holiday and leave coming up for our team. Conscious that some finance team also had leave during the August period, as is expected, but we've been fully transparent on both sides as to when team members are available. And I said no concerns currently that timetable will not be met.
Thank you, Jackson. I appreciate that input. And please pass on our congratulations to Ollie. A quick question to yourself, Lisa. That reference to the reevaluation, I assume that's to general property we own rather than the investment properties we're talking about. Can we just be clear on that? I'd just like to be clear on that.
Sorry about that. Yes, that's something that we're currently looking at with the team. I'm not aware that it relates to our investment properties. That's the case, Jackson, isn't it?
No, it's the other buildings, so operational buildings, not the investment portfolio.
Yeah, so no, it doesn't relate to those. But no, we'll bring back full details of that when the audited accounts are presented in. I think the meeting's scheduled for the beginning of November, isn't it? We may need to move the date of the audit committee. I think the accounts have got to be signed off by the 30th of November. But at the moment, we're hoping to meet that early first week in November date for the audited accounts.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, members, any questions that relate to this agenda item or to the external auditor? Councillor Yellen, I believe you've got a couple of questions.
I have indeed, thank you, Chairman. I need to find them here though. Just bear with me a second. Right, I can actually see them. At item 6, which I think is on page 19 on the agenda, refers to increases in expenditure and reduction in income. This is about the car parking income, which is a net loss of 82,000. And I just wondered, because this was particularly taking into account the government sales fees and charges compensation from April to June of 44,000. And I was just wondering, actually, because I know car parking costs increased last year, if this reduction in income is a direct result of the increase in the car parking charges, or if any work has been done around checking that at all.
Thank you, Chairman. So yes, I think what we've seen is we haven't seen a full recovery of the car parking usage or throughput back to the levels that we had in 2019-20 prior to COVID. So even though the tariffs were increased in March 2021, COVID does continue to have an impact on the income. The town centre car parks in particular have not made a full recovery as expected, and we've consistently seen a drop in income each month compared to the levels of income that we had in 2019-20. In particular, April and May of 2021, and then in January and February of 2022, particularly were affected and that's when the COVID cases were high, and that's when we saw our biggest drops in income in 21-22. So we still think that the effects of the pandemic were having an impact on our car parking income levels in 21-22, and that's why we were able to claim some of that back from the government sales fees and charges. Actually looking back over the years, and even going back as far as 2018 and 2019, we were about 80,000 down on our car parking income then as well. So it historically, for a number of years now, we've not fully met that income target. But yes, you're right, we did change the tariffs. There was a tariff review which went to council in December 2020, and that came in from March 2021.
Thank you. I go back. Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that does need to be kept an eye on, as to whether people are just not coming out and parking so much, or whether they're seeking alternative parking that is free to avoid the charges. And if so, then perhaps we might need to review again to encourage people. The second question, if I may, is paragraph 15, which again is on page 21. And this talks about in 2021, the long-term borrowing of the council decreased. and short-term borrowing increased from 603,000 to 615,000. So again, it was just really, my question was why short-term borrowing was required, and also why it needs to be increased.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Yelland. Yes, so the way that we have to disclose the short-term borrowing is any borrowing that has to be repaid within the next financial year. And the way the borrowing is structured through the Public Works Loan Board is that in the early years, you pay off more of the interest, and in the latter years, you pay off more of the principal. So it's a bit like a personal mortgage works. And therefore, the short-term borrowing is the principal amount. So as we go down through the years, the principal always increases. So that's why the short-term borrowing has gone up. But overall, our borrowing has decreased. It's gone from 28.945 million down to 28.34. So it's gone down £500,000 in the year. We didn't take out any further borrowing in 21-22. But yes, as you will always see that short-term borrowing going slightly up as we move through the PWLB principal structure of borrowing. And that's just because although the amount we pay is fixed, the interest will start going down and the principal will start increasing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Clear explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. They're both very good questions. Members? Yeah, I saw Paul's hand first, so no, go on.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very, very immaterial point, but I couldn't. Did we make any money or anything out of the lottery that we've started up? I didn't see it anywhere in here. I might have missed it. It's a lot of pages. I just didn't see any lottery income. So now we started a lottery.
Yes,
in last financial year.
I don't know if Mr. Hawke is on the line, whether he'd like to give any update on that, if that's possible.
I am Lisa. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Thank
Yes,
you.
we can, yeah.
Excellent. So we do make a small amount of income from the lottery. It works out about £2,000 a year. But the intention is that £2,000 a year gets completely redeployed and pushed back out to our communities. So there's no real income for us as a council as a result of the lottery. It's really set up for generating income for good causes.
Thanks, it's not in here. Okay, noted. Also a question, going through this, this is page 53 on your overall page 53. Expenditure and income analysed by nature. Could somebody help me on that one? I waved the white flag on that one last night. Just looking down the various different headers, so I sort of didn't get it at all, really. If somebody could help, give me an explanation. I think that could help the understanding. Thank you.
Yes, this is something that we're required to set out by sort of standard accounting practice, and it is something which is quite difficult to understand because of the way it's categorised. And looking at the, I think it's page 43 of the accounts, or 53 of our published agenda, we do have things going through the income and expenditure account. So, for example, looking at 21-22 compared to 2021, we've got an asterisk there against other service expenses, and that reflects the reduction in the payment of business grants paid out during the pandemic. So you can see there in 2021, it significantly went up to 18.2 million, but in 21-22 we weren't paying out the same levels. So for some areas, we are the sort of administering authority for the government. So the business grants, we have money from the government to administer those, but the grants still go through this expenditure and income analysed by nature. I mean, at the top there, you've got employee benefits, so that will be obviously salaries. Other things that similarly go through our income and expenditure, we've got things like housing benefit expenditure, which again, we claim the majority of that back through subsidy. So again, you will see expenditure going through our accounts, for all of that. It's around about 7 or 8 million a year for us. But then we would claw the majority of that back from the Department of Works and Pensions. So though the expenditure and income look very high when you consider our net budget is around £7 million, it's because of those things like business grants going through our accounts and housing benefits as well. But if that helps. Going through there, yes.
Does that sort of include tax and national insurance fee then we get?
We will pay tax and national insurance. So obviously we pay employers national insurance contributions. They'll be in that first line there. Employee benefits expenses.
So that's the salary.
Yes, essentially. Yes.
Yes, please do. Would you mind using your microphone, please?
Sorry, take it off. So it's a bit echoey. Right. The other one, this is a very minor point. I've lost my bit of paper. Underneath the parish charges, so can somebody help me with this? Or I'm carrying on down. 57. There was underneath the parish precept charges that parish precept charges, the parish income that we take in and pay out. There was a pension payment. Could somebody? I'm sorry about this. I haven't got it. I've lost my markings on it. Here we go. Right. Page 61. So parish council brief, and then we had pension administration expenses within that operating expenditure. It's yes, is that sorry, page 62 on the overall agenda, not those the accounts. Shall I tell you that page as well? That has 52 and 62.
Oh right, yes.
Yeah, just a slightly a little bit of that puzzled me.
Yeah, so the parish council precepts, those are just the precepted amounts that, again, we collect in and then pay over to the town and parish councils. The pension administration expenses, we are part of the Devon pension fund, and as part of that, there are some administration expenses that we have to pay annually. So, for example, we have to ask the actuaries to do statements for us that go in the financial statements, and we have to pay for that. We also have to pay for any advice during the year that we've commissioned from the actuaries of the Devon County pension scheme. So yes, there are, although we don't administer the pension fund, there are some small administration fees that we have to pay during the year for standard advice, but also for things that we need to close the accounts as well.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I think where I'm probably thinking is because parish council precepts leads that table, I'm thinking, where's the pension administration expenses related to the parish council precepts? But they're wholly not. It's just lumped into that table. That's why it's there.
Yeah, they're
okay,
just
that's what I was trying to figure out. I understand that, of course, there would be administration expenses,
they're not linked.
but there's nothing related to.
No.
Okay, no. Yeah, I'm reading too much into it. A bit too late. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ridges. Councillor Davies, I believe you have some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, just like to make a comment really. We go back sort of, for some of us who've been on the council for a few years, we go back sort of 5 or 6 years. We were looking at the financial stability of the council when we had our pretty major concerns. And then we look at the statement of accounts now, and it's quite impressive actually, how we've survived. We used to have those frightening figures come up, how many millions of pounds we're going to be overspending every year. So I think we're in a very solid position, and that should be noted. And obviously, congratulations to Lisa and the finance team for holding that together. The guidance from the internal auditors and external auditors. So that's the first point, just a note. But then some questions. Pensions always worry me, and obviously worry the external auditors because they always come up as a warning. But obviously, we're always dependent on staff salaries, how many staff we got, actuarial valuations. I think it's quite good. I'm quite pleased to see that the deficit has dropped from 27.1 million to 24.2 million. Still a lot of money. As I was thinking about this, I just wondered if, I know we're paying the money over quite a number of years, but if we wanted to increase it a bit, I'm not suggesting we are, but if we're just trying to work out what we could do. If we wanted to increase it, our payments back, could we take that out of an earmarked reserves or not? Is that allowable?
If we wanted to pay a sort of lump sum into the pension fund, you could do that through earmarked reserves. In the past, I think some councils did pay a lump sum off their pension deficit when they sold their council housing stock through the LSCT, the large scale voluntary transfer. I think to make that beneficial, you've got to pay off like a few million to make it worthwhile, really. But like I say, I know some councils did do that when they sold off their housing stock. The actuaries can always do a valuation, which, for example, would show what impact would it have on your revenue, your annual revenue account, if, for example, you paid $500,000 off your pension deficit. Incidentally, the deficit that is shown in here is not the same deficit as we will get when we get the actuarial revaluation done as at March 2022, that they are different values. So that's something we can always ask for evaluation to be done, but I suspect it wouldn't be worth our while because you've got to really put a lot of money in to the pension fund for it to be beneficial from a sort of revenue point of view. But technically you could, because you'd be putting revenue money into something which is a revenue item. Incidentally, West Devon, in terms of paying off our pension deficit, we have always kept a very low deficit recovery period. So members may remember when we set the budget 3 years ago, we took the option of keeping our deficit recovery period at 17 years, whereas a lot of Devon districts have a much longer deficit recovery period. It would be 20 years or 22 years or 23 years. And we specifically asked the actuaries if we could keep ours at 17 years. And that goes back, I mean, I've been with West Devon over 22 years now, and I can remember way back then, the council took a conscious decision to keep paying money off our pension fund rather than like some other councils did, which didn't or paid a lower amount of. We've always kept up our repayments, and I think we've probably benefited from that over the years of keeping a very low deficit recovery period. But there will certainly be options when around Christmas time, I think we'll get the results of the actuarial revaluation. And at that point, we can have another discussion with the actuaries about keeping our deficit recovery period at 17 years. And we may find that we won't have to pay as much into the pension fund for 23-24. It depends how the pension fund has performed. Obviously, the war in Ukraine and the cost of living crisis will have an impact on investment returns, as will inflation as well. So the actuaries will pull all of that position together. So yeah, that will definitely be something that will be part of the budget reports going forward when we set the 23-24 budget. Sorry, that's probably quite a long answer.
No, thank you. I think we're going to move to another question. So I'm making a comment about that. Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that feedback. I think that's really helpful. I think Councillor Davis is absolutely right to bring it up, though. I know we've had a number of conversations over a few years when you were chairman, Councillor Davis, of this, that it's something that we need to keep an eye on. And having the potential of that option is useful to be aware of, should a windfall come in. You never know. But thank you. Councillor Davis, I believe you've got some other questions.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, by no means was I actually intending spending any of our reserves. Best place into our reserves is to be in our reserves at the moment, but I just wondered what the practicalities were, so that was well explained, thank you. Question I ask this time of year, every year, I've done for 6 or 7 years now, to the section 151 officer, is about Serbico, the dormant company. Can you just explain for the benefit of us all why we've got that company and what the costs associated with running it up, please?
Yes, certainly. We've had Serbico for a number of years now. It is a dormant company, so it's not a company that we've ever used. I think years ago it was envisaged that there were some activities that we could run through the company that may have been beneficial to us. So things like it was around courses, particularly around environmental health. But as I say, we've never really got that off the ground. I don't think the demand has been there. And I think it isn't something which causes us a great deal of administration time. I think we file dormant accounts on an annual basis. That probably takes me about 15 minutes to go onto a Companies House website and file a set of dormant accounts. I do think, though, as a senior leadership team, as the Health Committee and Council, we need to think about, do we still need that company? And maybe we look to close that down at 31st of March 2023. I think that would probably be my recommendation, because otherwise we're going to have to keep doing an annual company return and file a set of dormant accounts. And I know it's something that we always get asked by Grant Thornton as well, is in terms of what's our plans for that company. So I think for sort of completeness, we probably need to look at closing the company down. Thank you, Chair.
Next one goes on to the with the census, which obviously we run from the electoral department. I may have misunderstood this, but I'm saying we have to sort of, is it that from now on that we're, the costs associated with that, we have to engage with it, but then we get paid at a later date? I read something about the census.
That's not something I'm that familiar with, and I think that would go through the electoral services team. But I would have thought that all of our costs we would be able to recover from government bodies around that. Yes, definitely.
Okay. Next one then.
Yeah, please carry on.
This is probably one for the external auditor. Just who's got any comment really? I know, Chair, you've been discussing this before, but Michael Gove, when he was Secretary of State, he could be Secretary of State now. Cabinet's been chosen today, but I don't expect he will be. But he promised councils greater financial stability. I mean, some financial stability would be good, but greater is get quite excited about greater financial stability. But it just seems to me that everything concerning this greater financial stability is now being pushed back a year or 2 years, whether it's the rollover settlements, fair funding review, even things like the new homes bonus, which every year we're sort of hoping we get something, and we always get very excited when we do, but it doesn't really give you financial stability or greater financial stability, not knowing whether we're going to get something or not. And it does seem to me that everything gets pushed back. We're expected to have some kind of greater financial stability, but everything that we're relying on, we're now being told that you find out in 2023, 24, or even 2024, 25, which doesn't really give us financial stability when we're in the current year. I just wondered if our external auditor had any information or comment from other councils, whether anybody else has concerns about this. Really, it just seems to be, it's just, well, even the 6 months, 5 or not. So it's just that it's difficult having, when we have to sort of provide a financial stability, we don't have an option for that. We have to have these balanced accounts at the end of the day. But it just seems to be very unfair when everything's uncertain.
Yeah,
These just maybe more comment to see if anybody had any feedback on that, us as a council or other councils.
well, I'll hand over to section 151 officer first, and then give the external auditor a chance to comment as well. But I'd like to say something further to that as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. That's certainly something which is of great concern to us. As you rightly say, Michael Gove MP did a commitment that there would be a 2-year fixed settlement. We are still hopeful that will open. And we were expecting for there to be a technical consultation on what the finance settlement is going to look like. And we were hoping that that technical consultation would be published before Parliament went into its summer recess. Obviously, that has not happened. We are still hopeful that it may happen sometime in September or October. I do know certainly that the District Councils Network are lobbying government really hard about we need to know what the parameters are that we are working for the finance settlement for 23-24. Councils up and down the country are working very hard on their budgets for next financial year, and we do need to know what is happening with things like the business baseline reset. We have had an invitation that's come out from government to be part of a pool again, a business rate pool for 23-24. So that very much suggests that the business rate baseline reset will be pushed back at least 1 year. It could be pushed back as far as 25-26, along with the fair funding review. So all of these major reforms to local government finance, we are expected to be pushed back at least 1 year, possibly 2 years. And I think probably the Homes for Ukraine scheme has taken a lot of capacity within the civil servant to devise, and I think purely they have not had the staff to work on major reform for local government finance because other things have come in that have taken priority. But as I say, we are hopeful that there will be some technical consultation at some point because we need to know what's happening with new homes bonus, things like rural services delivery grant, the new services grant, all of these things. We need to know, what are the parameters that we're working to set on budget for next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Jackson, do you want to make any comment?
Yeah, thanks very much for your chat. So I'd agree with what Lisa said. I think in terms of that wider question of, is this something we pick up at other authorities? Absolutely, everything Lisa's just explained is pretty much copy and paste what I'd hear from most, if not all, Section 151 local government officers. It's a really challenging environment. What that means for financial sustainability, bringing back to that, is when Lisa and the team are pulling together the medium-term financial plan for the council, there are a significant number of assumptions that have to be built into that plan. And clearly that does drive decision making around council tax levels, investment levels, etc. Without that certainty, more estimation brings more risk, doesn't it, automatically? We, as part of our second responsibility, so obviously we've been discussing the financial statements and we have our responsibility for the true and fair view of those. The other side of our responsibility is then the value for money arrangements that are in place within the authority. One of the three pillars of those arrangements that we're required to look at is financial sustainability. So as part of that work, we do consider the arrangements ultimately that the council puts into place, but we consider that within the national context of what is the framework that government has provided Lisa and her colleagues with. From, as you may remember from last year's auditor's annual report, we didn't identify any significant weaknesses in the arrangements in place. So our view was the council was responding appropriately to the situation it finds itself in, but it seems every year we talk about a number of the things that Lisa's touched on, so fair funding, settlement, etc., and the expectation of that coming shortly. Unfortunately, that expectation never actually turns into reality, and so there's more and more assumptions built in. You also mentioned historically at the council, clearly one of the ways that Lisa and other colleagues manage that risk is through the level of usable reserves and earmarked reserves that you hold. So the greater the uncertainty, the more ultimately Lisa may feel that she needs to hold in a usable reserve for an unexpected shock. So this all leads back to our value for money work in particular, and how we assess the arrangements and the assumptions that are built into plans moving forward in the environment that currently local government finds itself in.
Thank you, that's really helpful, and thank you to yourself as well, Lisa. I had a conversation with the leader about this earlier on. I mean, I think certainly here it's been a regular occurrence, and certainly I've experienced it in other authorities, that the delay in government making announcements on settlements has an impact on planning, and as the external auditor says, that has an impact on risk as well. I'd like to actually bring a proposal to the committee that, and I've spoken to the leader about this already, about writing to the new Prime Minister and I'm assuming the new Secretary of State about this, actually requesting, that they look at this, because, obviously Lisa and her team now are working on budgets for next year and, and onwards. But I don't think it would hurt for us to remind the government that actually this is really important to us for our forward planning. And my proposal is that we write from ourselves as the audit committee, and if excuse me, sorry, if the committee are of mind to support that, that perhaps you're okay with between myself, the leader, and the 151 officer, excuse me, would write a letter, covering the points that we've mentioned so far. Would somebody be willing to supplement? Thank you, Councillor Davis.
Can you clarify? Are you essentially saying that we need a information on what the budget is as soon as possible? That's essentially what you're saying. It's a speed point.
Yeah, I think
allow us to plan. That is essentially what you were saying.
That is essentially what I'm saying, but I think there's also the aspect of the forward plan of how things are going to come forward, because the consultation that Lisa referred to is also important about ongoing planning. So, going forward, do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so Lisa, do you want to explain what the consultation is? Because you're better to explain that to me. There's two parts. Yes, you're right to point out that it's about a timely function, about our forward planning of the immediate, but there's also this consultation, technical consultation, that 151 will explain, 151 officer explained, which I think is also important for us to acknowledge.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So that technical consultation will really set out what the rules are and the parameters are for setting our budget for 23-24. So, for example, the sort of thing that technical consultation has said in the past is it will say about the business rate baseline reset. So we need to know when is that going to happen. And the reason that's important to us is we will lose some of our business rate income at whatever point they reset the base. And that's because when business rate was localised back in 2014, since then we've been growing our business rate base, as of other councils, and at that point that they reset it, all of a sudden our income will drop from business rates. And what we want to see is some sort of smoothing mechanism so that it drops over a number of years rather than a sudden drop. And it's also when that business rate baseline gets reset, we also will lose our pooling gain as well, because in the early years of a pool, it doesn't make financial sense to be part of a pool because there's too much risk. So we are getting a pooling gain of over 100,000 a year. So again, we not only lose a bit of our business rate income, we lose the pooling gain as well. So what we need to know from the government is, when is that going to happen? Is it going to happen next year? Or have we got another 2 years until that's going to happen?
I think I get what you talk about, the calculation.
Yes. And the timing, yes. Yeah. But also for town and parish councils, because again, that technical consultation should set out whether there are any council tax referendum thresholds for town and parishes. There has never been in the past. That doesn't mean to say there won't be for the future. And so again, it's important for us, for also our town and parishes to know when they're setting their budget, have they got any thresholds that they've got to adhere to? So it's for the borough council's finances and also our town and parishes as well.
And some of the town and parishes probably want to keep quiet on that.
Are you happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with the calculation.
Thank you for asking the question, though. Councillor Davis?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it just seems ridiculous to me because I appreciate several of us in this room as members of business people. And it's like someone saying to your business, right, you need to do this now. Another person saying at some stage, we will pay you. We're not too sure how much we're going to pay you or when we're going to pay you, but you've got to do your bit now. It doesn't, we will say, get stuck, basically, aren't you? And then we want to know what the terms are before we actually engage. But then, unfortunately, as a council, we can't do that. We have to do what we're statutory responsibility, what we're responsible for. But then, you know, but then we're told that at some stage we'll, like new homes bonuses, wait here for bonus. You may get it, you may not get it, and we'll work out later date how much you're going to get. It doesn't help you when you're trying to balance your, you know, that's why I provide a budget, is it? So I think if we can actually find out, you know, the payments and the timings of it, that'd be brilliant.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Yeah,
I've got one quick question.
Please do.
It's on the agenda, so I'll make this quick.
do you use your microphone, please?
Chair, keep doing that.
Thank you.
So in terms of earmarked reserves, can I ask why we still earmark the 16-17 budget surplus contingency? It's probably a question you've had before in past years. And when do we as a committee review what is earmarked reserves and what is not?
Before we do, can I just square off that proposal and then we'll come back to your question? No, it's absolutely fine. Was your comment to do with the proposal, Councillor Yan? I'll come to you first then.
Yeah, it was really just actually a suggestion that it's a good proposal, and I think that possibly that all of the district councils that are involved within Team Devon might find it useful to know that this is something that West Devon are considering and may like to pick it up themselves. So there would be a correspondence then to central government going through from various districts that are represented at Team Devon, which could add a little bit of weight, and that possibly, you know, I'm sure Leader will probably be happy to pick that up in his role with Team Devon.
That's a good suggestion, Councillor Yellen. So put the sorry, Leader, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I'll comment on that. And yes, happily, I think I just would like to sort of add a rider to that. I think that ministers, and particularly local government ministers, are well aware of this argument. They talk about it often. I think other conflicting and bigger priorities tend to get in the way, and that's what tends to happen. So whatever we write to them will not be a blinding revelation to them. They will know it. It may well be that our best effect might be to add our weight, as we would always do, to the Local Government Association and the District Councils Network in making this case. But I think there's no harm in us writing, and I think there's no harm in us also bringing it to the attention of our MPs so that they are also aware when they come to have those discussions. So those would be the things that I suggest we ought to do.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I think we was writing a letter copying in, as Councillor Davis has just remarked, to the two MPs, plus the LGA. I don't think that will hurt, and you know, picking up the point that Councillor Yellen said. So with that in mind, can we have a vote on that? But we've obviously I proposed it. Councillor Davis has seconded it. In favour? Thank you. So that's carried. Cathy, you got that. I'll come back to your question now, Councillor Ridges. Thank you for being patient with that.
Sure. Yes, it's the 16-17 budget surplus contingency still earmarked. And when do we, as a committee, get to review what is the earmarked reserves and not, or do we?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I think we do that through two mechanisms. Firstly, the quarterly revenue budget monitoring goes to the hub committee on a quarterly basis, and attached to the budget monitoring is always a full list of the reserves and what the commitments are against those reserves. So that particular reserve, the 16-17 budget surplus contingency, 50,000 of that 86 is actually already committed for affordable housing, and that is funding for the Spring Hill project. So when that project comes into being, that money will get spent out of that reserve. There are some, in the past, we have done some sort of tidying up exercises where we've got small balances on some of these reserves, and we've put them, for example, into the financial stability reserve. So yes, that is something that we do as part of the budget process. Also each year we do have the members budget workshop, and we always attach a list of all of the reserves and again any commitments against those reserves, and review that through that process as well. So I think it's probably through the revenue budget monitoring, through the hub committee, but also as part of the budget workshop, which we normally have around November time. Thank you.
Thank you. Please do.
So we don't, in essence, as an audit committee, I throw this out there, would this be advisable with too many eyeballs on it, too many committees on it, too much admin, that audit do look at this once a year? Chair.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable suggestion.
Bring a report back to the audit committee that's got the same information that would go to the hub committee, and put that on the agenda as well. It's normally a hub function, but there isn't any reason if it's an information report that it could also come to the audit committee.
Just picking up Councillor Ridge's points, is it something that perhaps we look at prior to the hub, and then we can make any comments that then can be part of the hub's consideration of the report? Leader, would you be happy with that?
I think I'd be happy with that for this committee to have an eye and a role in that process. On Section 151 officers, okay, I'm happy.
Yeah, I think. Thank you for that, Councillor Richards. I think that's a good suggestion. We just note that then, and that's great. I've got a couple of questions. Go right back to the beginning. The 196,000 savings. So we just be clear about what that is, please, Lisa. I know that we talked about this in the briefing, but I think it'd be good to, for the public, in a sense, to understand what that saving is. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So what that's saying is that when we closed down our budget for 21-22, we've got an underspend there of 196,000. Now, the main areas are shown on page 9 of the accounts. It's page 19 of the audit committee agenda. So just looking at those analysis of variations in section 6, we did have some salary savings last year. That has mainly been due to vacancies. We are continually finding it difficult to recruit staff. So we did have some vacancy savings last year. That accounted for 81,000. We also have some savings in our homelessness service, particularly in terms of prevention expenses. And we also had some savings on, some additional income on housing benefit payments, in that if we've got some housing benefit overpayment recoveries, because we also get housing benefit subsidy on that, that is additional income to the council. And members will remember that 2 years ago we did take out the budget for that, because what we thought was, with the introduction of universal credit, that those housing benefit overpayment recoveries would get less and less. But actually in 21-22 we did have 82,000 of those, so that has helped or certainly contributed to the underspend as well. We did also have 250,000 of recycling credits and dry recycling additional income. That has not been part of the 196, purely because that additional income has been transferred into the waste earmark reserve. And you will see in the earmark reserves that the waste earmark reserve has got a balance on it. I'll just find the page. But the waste earmark reserve, yes, it's over sort of 600,000 now. And there are plans against that reserve. One of which is we recognise that there is work that we need to do at the Haydown depot. So that's capital expenditure we will need to spend funds on, that we're recommending comes out of the waste earmark reserve. It's also recommended that we will need an additional vehicle for the waste fleet as well. And that's because we don't currently have a spare vehicle within our fleet. So although that waste earmark reserve has got some funding in it. There are recommendations to members as to how some of that would need to be spent on the waste service for 22-23.
Thank you. My second question, and again, I do know the answer to this, but again, I think for the public who might be watching this, I think, you know, us putting money into reserves, you know, why we squirreling away money, you know, what's the level of our reserves? I think that's important for us to declare why that's important for us to have that contingency and the level of where our reserves are. Again, can I hand that back to you, Lisa?
Yes, certainly, Chair. When we set, yesterday, we published the Hub Committee agenda, and on there is our medium-term financial strategy. And when members set the budget in February of this year, we did set a minimum balance for our unearmarked reserves of 900,000. We also set an operating level of 1.25 million. And I think it's very comforting that our unearmarked reserves are higher than that minimum operating level. Yep. We're now at 1.49 million, and that's the highest our unearmarked reserves have been for a number of years. Also, in terms of our earmarked reserves, I mean, just being over 9.1 million, I think that's a very prudent level for both the unearmarked reserves and earmarked reserves. I know that Grant Thornton, when they do their value for money assessment, they will look at some comparisons against other Devon districts and other district councils of comparable size. And it's always good to see that benchmarking, to see how we compare to other councils. I suspect we will be lower than average. So although we've got good level of reserves, probably when that's compared nationally, I suspect we will still be lower than average, but at a good, prudent level. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lisa. I think it's helpful, and I think it's important that we're clear about why the reserves are important for us in our everyday running of the council. We've had some good discussion and good questions there. Members, is there anything else anybody would like to ask? I've got a couple of questions related to the risk register, but I think I can pick them up when we talk about the up-to-date risk register in due course. So if members are happy, I think, Catherine, we're just noting, aren't we? Members happy to note the draft accounts? Thank you, members, that's great. Okay, so we're going to move to item 6, update on progress of the 22-23 internal audit plan. And I'd like to welcome Paul Middlemass to our committee. Paul has taken over from Dominic, who of course has gone on to pastures new. So Paul, perhaps you could just give a brief intro. I know you did last meeting, but just in case anybody who wasn't there, just a brief introduction yourself, and then I'll hand it to you. Chris, sorry, I was I'm jumping ahead, aren't I? You need to give a brief input, don't you?
I'm happy to give a brief input.
My apologies.
Not at all. That's fine. Thank you. Well, the internal audit papers include 2 attachments. Firstly, the internal audit charter and strategy. This is presented for agreement, as it is a requirement of the public sector internal audit standards for it to be periodically reviewed by audit committee. In essence, it lays out the responsibilities of internal audit and the council in relation to the internal audit activity. And secondly, the internal audit progress report. Members will note this has been revised to use the standard Devon audit partnership format. It's intended to be clearer and provide more focused information. In terms of progress to deliver the plan, this has been impacted by continued allocation of one of the auditors to support grants administration. The Section 151 officer has agreed with the partnership that the council can provide substitute audit cover to make up for the auditor shortfall, which should resolve this problem and enable progress to be recovered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds, and again, apologies for not coming directly. Paul, I'll hand over to yourself.
Yes, good afternoon to you. So Paul Maz from Devon Audit Partnership. Yes, I'm taking over from Dominic, who remains, of course, in the partnership. So his expertise remains available. I've been with DAP for the last two years. I currently look after yourselves, of course, but also North Devon, Mid Devon, Torridge, and also doing quite a lot of work in Timbridge. So I think one of the benefits the partnership is looking to bring is to sort of that cross-cutting look about and identification of good practice and so on across the different councils to see, well, how is this council doing it? Is there a lesson and can that be passed on and so on? So I think there's going to be, sort of increased attention on that. So yeah, so very much looking forward to working with yourselves. The audit paper itself, so you'll see it's in essence it's two papers. So the attachment A is the audit charter and the strategy, which normally there's two documents. So you've got charter and the strategy. So as Councillor Edmonds has said, it's a requirement that we periodically present this to you to review. The charter in essence details the purpose and aim of internal audit and how we ensure we are professional and independent, and sets out our authority and accountabilities and responsibilities and so on. The strategy itself, I suppose, provides more detail about how we undertake our work, including the requirement to produce an annual report and our own performance and priority measures. So I just wanted to sort of break there to ask if anyone's got any questions about the charter and strategy. This is a standard, as it's a fairly standard document that we use across our partners that sets out our role and so on. Any questions on that?
Thank you, Paul. I mean, I think I remember Dominic saying that obviously the plan is in place to help us get through the year, and some of the functions that are set by certain dates aren't necessarily going to be on that date. Things can be moved around, so we might see some peaks and troughs in places that sort of don't directly match the plan, but over the year they get done. That's something that Dominic mentioned. Members, do you have any questions for Paul to give way to?
Yeah, I just noticed the leisure contract management. Is that it says draft expected mid-September?
Okay, so I was talking about the first bit.
Sorry.
It's fine. The charter and strategy. I was going on to the second paper,
Sure.
Which was the actual progress update. So, so the progress update itself. So yes, as Councillor Edmonds has said, it's presented in a fairly standard DAP for its landscape. So hopefully it's a bit clearer. I've done a bit of work on it. You'll see on page 179, sort of that's the current assessment of where you are in terms of your assurance statement. So we're sort of through the year, we'll regularly update you on what we think the annual assurance opinion will be. It's obviously currently set as a reasonable. And then on the left of that page is in essence a summary of the audits that we're sort of done since the last audit committee. So as you can see, for our audits on creditor and housing benefits, we provided reasonable, and then on the asset investment strategy, we provided a substantial assurance. And then going down for the risk-based audits, that we call them, so on development management and section 106 and so on, we also provide a reasonable. So we know, yes, there's been some good progress since we last did an audit in that area in terms of recording and monitoring all the agreements that are being made and ensuring collection and so on. So more detail on each of those audits is in the appendix to that paper. That's from page 181. So in essence, those ones are all pretty much green. Obviously, I think when it's a limited or unsatisfactory report, we'll be sort of highlighting it more detail in the summary, and expect more questions. So page 180, I mentioned recommendation tracking. So as you know, as part of the audit, we identified what we think are weaknesses and discuss and agree with management, and then agree management actions that need to be done to address them. So the risk is obviously that then the actions are not taken forward and not progressed. So typically when we do audits, we look back at previous audits and say, well, has management done what they agreed to do? And I suppose there's been a number of instances where we've identified recommendations which have not been implemented. So it's really what council needs is a system to track the audit recommendations, to see what recommendations have been implemented. Are they on track to deliver? Now, we've had a couple of discussions with Lisa and her people, and I think we've got a way forward in terms of going back to April 2020 and highlighting all the particularly the high and medium recommendations, and getting a sense check about have they been implemented, are they still open or overdue, and so on. And then when that exercise is completed, we'll then sort of introduce a steady state tracking of these recommendations. These are open and so on. So all the audits going forward, we will track the recommendations and so on. And then going down that page, next section talks about delivery of the plan. So yes, we continue to deliver our 2021-22 audits. 3 of them are on the paper. Actually, post publication of the paper, we've now agreed 2 more. So in essence, we've only got two left to do, and we now have sort of continued to focus on the current year plan. So with one issue being that one of the auditors is continues to focus on the COVID-19 business grants and so on, and as Councillor Edmonds said, Lisa has said yes, she will provide the resource to make up for that time, to allocate audit time from auditor from elsewhere. So yes, yes, we're now focusing on this year's plan, and as I said, so Appendix 1 is a summary of the audit reports, and Appendix 2 provides the sort of detail on the summary plan, where we are on each audit, and I suppose when we intend to undertake our audits. So that's a quick canter through, but obviously I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody?
Question, are we on target for our September activity? Like the fusion report, the leisure report, that was the key point.
Yes, so the leisure report, yes, so we are doing that at the moment. So and Matt, who's he's very aware of the of the contractor and the requirement too. So we do intend to report although recently he has been diverted to more grant stuff, but we are looking to report in September. And I mean, I suppose an initial assessment is that we think it's pretty good. The arrangement's pretty good to manage the contractor.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Councillor Ridges. I think I know the answer, but I thought I'd ask anyway. On page 184, refers to Dartmouth Lower Ferry and Salcombe Harbour, which of course are Southam's related. Is this because you're doing across the plan is partly to do with work across both councils, and therefore functions that relate to South Hams are on there because it's part of the plan for joint services.
Yes, it is, and I think there would be probably again if you work to sort of try to split the different audits and say, well, this is Southampton or West Devon and so on. So yes, you'll see some elements that okay, this is not directly yours, but most of them will be. Although I suppose it's also useful for you to know where our activity is also focused through the year.
Yeah, it's not a problem. I just thought I'd ask. Thank you. Members, any other questions for Paul? No? Okay, I think we have two recommendations. I think the first one we need to have a vote on. The second one's noting. Correct? Have I read it correctly?
Noting and approved. Second one.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out, Kathy. So if members are happy to take it on block, then could I have a proposer? Julie, yeah. Councillor Davis seconding. All in favour? That's carried for both. Thank you very much, members. That's brilliant. And thank you, Paul. Well done on your first visit to us. Look forward to seeing you again next time. You're welcome to stay, of course. Okay, item 7, strategic risk register. I believe, Leader, this is yourself leading on this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In front of members is a paper on the strategic risk update, and I'm very grateful to Mr. Hawke for doing the legwork here and preparing the paper and the report. The report is a regular biannual event at which the Audit Committee are asked to review the strategic register and make recommendations to Council. The paper circulated sets out the strategy, roles and responsibilities of committees and officers. The appendix that's attached sets out our performance management framework, which is also considered by Hub and lead members and officers on a regular basis, whereby they feed identified or emerging needs into this process. It also includes our risk management objectives, the process and the scoring. The results are contained in a useful chart and colourful chart set out on page 199. The Audit Committee is to provide independent assurance to the Council about the effectiveness of the Council's risk and risk management, internal controls, and the overall assurance framework. The register considers those risks which currently provide the greatest threat to achieving our strategic priorities, while the appendix provides a useful summary of those risks that have been identified under current review. Members should note that 2 risks have been reviewed and removed. Firstly, a risk revolving around the organisational commitment to change. In our view, the Council has demonstrated significant commitment and openness to change over the past few years, and I'm really happy in that sense to praise both staff and leadership in achieving what we have over that period. Secondly, we have removed the risk of COVID-19 impact on services. Whilst we appreciate that COVID is still in circulation, still real, the rollout of the vaccine and return to more normal working practices are noted. This impact, if it occurs, will now be included within existing risks regarding inadequate staffing resources and business continuity. 2 risks have been added. Firstly, the cost of living. Clearly, it will be a priority of the Council to enable resources to be put in place to support residents as much as is possible during this difficult time. And the way that we're going to deal with that remains open to debate and formulation. And secondly, around the area of the Homes for Ukraine scheme, which is an additional requirement loaded on top of our existing acknowledgement of the housing crisis. This development clearly presents challenges, but challenges to which so far we have responded well. If members refer finally to the diagram at the end of the appendix on page 199, it sets out the position relative to the different scoring parameters that have been applied of the different risks. It's worth noting that the risk is assessed collectively within the senior leadership team, and scores are necessarily subjective to some extent. Members may want to question those. Members may also make recommendations to council and, if appropriate, refer the highest scoring red zone risks to overview and scrutiny for further detailed investigation. The senior leadership team will continue to monitor and provide a further report in 6 months' time as per normal. So I'd like to commend the report to you members, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Leader. Appreciate that. Members, anybody got any specific questions? Yeah, go for it, Councillor Davies.
It's sort of a question, but I'm not too sure anyone knows the answer to it. But if we look at the country as a whole, we've got one of the lowest unemployment rates for years and years. So it's not a great pool of people looking for jobs. And whether you're in the construction industry, the health service, the legal service, whatever provider is, whatever service you want out there, everyone's saying there's a shortage, whether it's lorry drivers, everything. And as mentioned earlier, one of the areas that we saved money is because we didn't have a full complement of staff. Not that we wanted to save money in that way, because it's better to have a full complement of staff, because then you have provide a better service to your residents. And so I'm not too sure that the leader or anyone else has got an answer to this, but how do we ensure that, certainly in areas like planning, that we can compete and actually, because actually planning is a big area where there's a massive national shortage of planning specialists. So how on earth do we go forward? In some ways it's rhetorical, but it is a question maybe to the leader. How do we go forward in actually making sure that we do get the staff that we need to provide a good service? That is a risk. If we can't, if we haven't got the staff to do the job doesn't get done, and then we start messing things up, and we're getting penalties and all sorts of things. Yeah, how do we somehow fill the vacancies? What effort is going into this to sort of make sure we don't fall short?
That's a good question, Councillor Davies. Leader, would you like to respond?
Well, as far as I can, it is an area that's consistently under review. We are looking constantly at the package, the employment package that we offer to specialist staff, and trying to shape that in the best way that we can. We also have a programme of taking on new joiners at a very junior level into that department, and offering them training in a sort of apprenticeship type scheme to bring people in at a lower level, provide them with skills, and obviously they will provide us with skills and work in return. So we are constantly looking at different ways of making sure that we can manage that. It is difficult. It's not just planners. There are other specialist roles as well that we are constantly trying to fill. But the work that goes into this is not just around pay, but looking at the whole sort of employment package that we can offer people and trying to shape that in the best way possible. We're in a competitive market with other people, and that's probably the best I can say at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Jory. That's helpful. Yes, go on, Councillor Yellow. I have got a question, but I'll give way to you first.
Thank you. It was really more a comment, I think, than a question. It's looking at sort of skills shortage, but also the issues, as we all know, about particularly the availability of rented accommodation. So, it's perhaps thoughts given into investing in the training of people who are already in the area, who have got somewhere to live, whether still with their parents or they're already living here, rather than perhaps looking further afield where people need to move in. It's not to say, of course, we wouldn't employ people who are moving in. I'm talking about it really from where people will live, who may want to come and work in a beautiful place as we are in West Devon, but in actual fact can't find the appropriate accommodation. So it's thinking a bit outside the box in terms of what training we are able to facilitate to bring people in who are in the area already and want to train in this particular area.
So that's a very good point, Councillor Yelland. Leader, do you want to comment on that?
I think that's a good point. I think that reflects a wider issue, which of course does not directly affect the achievement of our strategic objectives, which we've recognised within our declaration of a housing emergency of key workers. And the shortage of accommodation for key workers who would like to move into the area and take up employment, and we are part of that. So I suppose in that sense, anything we can do to alleviate that side of the housing crisis will indirectly potentially benefit us as well. So I take the point. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader, I've got a question. It sort of relates, but I did insinuate this earlier on. It relates back to the draft statement of accounts for last year. And obviously within that draft statement of accounts, there's reference to some of the risks. And one of them particularly, and you did refer to this in your introduction, the bit of business continuity at the time was the rating was 20, and clearly a red rating. I wondered, two-part question really. One, how have things progressed to this year, and what further things might we do to bring that down? Because I think all of us are aware that, you know, our borough is full of SMEs, and, you know, obviously with the cost of living, particularly with fuel prices, you know, I think all of us are concerned about not just our residents, but our local businesses that help provide an income for those residents. Leader.
Thank you. In the context of this report, of course, business continuity refers to the council's ability to continue business in the face of any difficulties that could be encountered. And you'll note from the chart that we have moved our rating for the risk around business continuity to a slightly less onerous part of the chart, and that reflects the difficulties that we were clearly foreseeing at the time, revolving around, amongst other things, COVID and staff shortages and everything else that was happening. So I think, you know, to that extent, the case for the business continuity of the council revolves around good planning, in particular good financial management, but us focusing resources on doing the things that we feel are going to have most impact within our communities. As you quite rightly said, the whole business sector is going to go through a difficult period over the next year and beyond. And part of our income comes from business rates. So we've got to do as much as we can, I think, to make sure that we are supporting as far as possible the small business sector. And if there are grants available, making sure we get those out as effectively as we can. So there's a limit to how much we can do, but I think that revolves around us doing what we need to do, what we've decided to do, as effectively and efficiently as possible. So I think that's probably the best answer I can provide.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for the clarification. I think you were right to do that. Yes, Paul, did you want to make a comment on that?
Not specifically on that, although I'd just like to, I suppose, make a number of points. Obviously, we see quite a few different risk registers across different councils and so on. And I suppose, you know, I think probably identify this as a good sort of practice area. I mean, I think there's quite a few different areas which are really good. For instance, a relatively low number of risks, which means you can focus, you know, on those strategic risks. Obviously, other councils got, you know, typically have many risks. The fact that, for instance, you've got a definition of what is the impact, you know, sort of in terms of across different areas such as reputation, service quality, legal, regulatory, and so on. That's again a really good thing. A really clear format for each risk, and I really like the risk score history, so you can see whether or how the risk score has actually gone up or down over time. I suppose if I a couple other things. So people or organizations often forget that opportunities bet. So that's a challenge we often make to business areas is, okay, and if you look at the documents, there's often it's called a risk and opportunity strategy, but the opportunities bet is often missed. Secondly, obviously, we always recommend periodic horizon scanning, as you've perhaps done today, in terms of what are the risks coming up, and then just finally, perhaps again looking at other councils that tend to have climate change as a net zero, as one of their strategic risks and strategic objective. So I just thought I'd feed that in. Hopefully it's useful, those comments.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, I think picking up a little bit from the leaders and referring slightly to what you just said, Paul, that if you think back to during COVID, obviously we had to administer, and the team did really well administering the grants that government released to enable particularly ourselves as well as the local businesses to keep going. But obviously that put an additional risk on us in that, you know, we had to assess that the appropriateness of the application and all the rest of it. I suppose one of the things that might be out there from government is a potential package balanced against the aspiring cost of fuel, that the government might bring forward a sort of a similar sort of package that again that we might have to administer. But I guess one of the positives in that we've done it once with the COVID grants, that, you know, those processes are in place. We just changed the title on the bit of paper, I guess. But I think that was kind of behind my question that or the comments that I made earlier on, Leader. Did you want to come back?
Yeah, so it's a fair point, and we don't know what's coming down the track, but there may well be something of that nature. We literally at this point don't know, but I think the experience we've been through over the last couple of years means we are well prepared to get that type of operation up and running quickly if needed. So I think that accumulated experience and knowledge will stand us in good stead over what is to come. So yeah.
Thank you. One of the action points on one of the recommendations, is that you know, is there anything that we would like to be passed to scrutiny, particularly to address? Is there anything any member has? Councillor Yelland.
Yeah, I do think that the two new additions to the risk register, it would be very helpful to all parties, I think, for that to be regularly scrutinised, to keep it fleet and flexible, to ensure that the council adapts accordingly as quickly as possible. So I would certainly, and I've lost the page, my thing's gone funny for some reason. I would certainly perhaps like to add that 205 is it? Yeah, it's gone a bit on odd, sorry.
205 and 204.
We're doing things electronically. 205 and 204, yeah, the right bit. Yes, the cost of living pressures and the Homes for Ukraine placements. I think I would like to add that into the recommendation, but that does go to ONS to go through their procedures.
I'm happy to second that. I think that's a good suggestion. Councillor Davis or Councillor Richards, anything else? No? Okay. Lisa, did you want to come back on that?
Only, Chair, to say that both of those items are going to the next hub committee meeting. There is a report on the cost of living crisis and also Homes for Ukraine. So it is going to the hub committee meeting.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I think the leader did specifically say recommend potentially to scrutiny. I will defer to yourself of what the correct protocol would be, but I think it wouldn't hurt for scrutiny to look at it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And of course, the cost of living pressures in particular is a very live topic, which we have only recently brought into play. We're waiting to hear a little bit about what might come from central government, but we are putting together our own plans, working on those, and it's something that, for example, is going to be discussed later on this afternoon at our informed council meetings, and the ideas from that will come back via hub. So perhaps at a later stage, we ought to update ONS on this matter. So I'd be really happy if you wanted to carry that forward with that recommendation.
Thank you, Leader. That's really helpful. Councillor Yellen.
since I moved it, I was just, my thinking behind it actually was to enable, as did say, the council be fleet of foot in any responses in changing, as leader has said, with stuff happening imminently and quickly and swiftly, to ensure that also the wider membership in a formal setting does have an opportunity to speak to this particular item, for it to actually go through ONS anyway. And I understand going through Hub, and the Hub may wish to direct ONS. I don't know who actually, I'm not sure if it is Hub, Audit, or both. They can do that, but for it to, because it is something pressing, it is urgent, and it does have an impact on this council. So I think we need to be sure that it is thoroughly debated by all parties.
I completely agree, and I fully support that. I think just for process, I think we add that as an amendment, Kathy. Is that we haven't voted yet, but just for clarification.
I would add it as an amendment. Yeah.
Okay. Members, are you happy to vote on that as an amendment to recommendation 2? Yeah, happy to support. Okay, happy with that. So that becomes substantive now for item 2. Yeah, thank you. Is there anything else before we go to the vote on the 2 items for this? Members, no? Everybody happy that you've had your, where are we? No, so it's just the, where are we? Sorry, it's 1 item, isn't it? My apologies. I was looking at the wrong sheet. Sorry, my apologies. Trying to hop backwards and forwards, it's end up on the wrong page. Having the same problem as Councillor Yellen. Okay, so the recommendation is on page 189 with the amendment. That's correct. So with that amendment, members, are you happy to vote on that recommendation? Thank you. Great. Okay. Item 8, annual treasury management. Councillor Edmonds, you sat there very patiently. It's back to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual review of treasury management activities in 2021-22 compared to the strategies approved by members in April 2021. Income from investments was below budget for 2 reasons. Firstly, bank base rate was at an all-time low during the majority of 2021. And secondly, investments were kept very short-term due to uncertainties over cash flow demands for payment of business grants and other variables associated with the uncertainties with the investment market. A summary of the Council's treasury position as at the 31st of March 22 is set out on page 211 of your agenda papers. Treasury investments stood at £27.4 million at the end of the financial year, with total external borrowing of £28.3 million, a net borrowing position of £938,000. The Council's capital expenditure plans are the key driver of treasury management activity. The outputs of the capital expenditure plans are reflected in prudential indicators, and it is these indicators that assist members to overview and confirm capital expenditure plans. The report confirms that the Council operated within the prudential indicators approved by members for the financial year ended the 31st of March 2022, as detailed in Appendix B. Finally, Chair, the report has 2 recommendations. 1, approves the actual 2021-22 prudential and treasury indicators in this report. And secondly, notes the annual treasury management report for 2021-22.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Anybody got any questions on this item? Personally, don't, but no.
It was only one quick observation,
Please do.
that we hadn't lost money. Haven't made much, but we haven't lost it. When I was looking at their pension statement or investment statement, I'm sure it's gone the other way. So I thought that wasn't a bad job at all.
I think that's a reflection on the investment pots that they're in. I think. Thank you. It's a good comment. Thank you, Councillor Ridges. Well, if no one else has got any comments to make on that, I think we can look at the two recommendations. Recommendation 1 is to approve the actual 21-22 prudential and treasury indicators in this report. So we'll take that separately. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Davis. Councillor Ridge is happy to second. Thank you. All in favour? Otherwise, I'm on them all. Yeah, great stuff. And the recommendation 2 is to note. Members happy to note recommendation 2. Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Final item 9. The investment property update and monitor report. Councillor Edmonds, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the report provides the Audit Committee with an update on the performance and current risk profile of the 4 investment properties acquired by the Council in 2018-19. It's good practice for the Audit Committee to receive a regular monitoring report on the Council's investment property portfolio. Overall, the performance has been in line with expectation, with 96.4% of the investment portfolio income of £1.19 million received. The arrears position of £43,000 represents just 3.6% of the portfolio income. Appendix 2 provides details of rental income, but please note this is a restricted document. The portfolio is currently generating a net revenue income of £300,000 per annum as an ancillary benefit, which contributes to the financial sustainability of the Council. The total amount of net revenue received since the investment properties were purchased is £1.05 million. A sum of £417,502 has been put aside in a reserve to fund voids, management costs and repairs as and when they arise. Appendix 3 sets out details of the property revaluations as at the 31st of March 2022, and members will note that this is also a restricted document. A spread of lease expiries and breaks have been achieved. However, there are certain points, and particularly in 2028, at which there is a concentration of lease events. The scope for further property investment has been restricted as a result of a change in the Public Works Loan Board guidance issued in 2020. Following the change, investment opportunities are restricted to in-area purchases only. The regeneration and investment strategy was approved on the 5th of April 2022, and this replaced the investment property acquisition strategy. In support of the corporate strategy, officers continue to consider potential investment opportunities across the borough and bring them forward to the Regeneration and Investment Committee if they meet the criteria set out in the Regeneration and Investment Strategy. And finally, Chair, the report recommendation is that the Audit Committee notes the performance and risks of the investment property portfolio to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Members, I know you're all very experienced, but obviously just a reminder, if we are going to discuss either Appendix 2 or 3, we would need to go into Part 2 to discuss those. I'll open it up. Anybody want any comments? Yes, Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. With hindsight, I mean, when we first started talking about investment properties, there was a lot of people quite sceptical about it for the right reasons, about borrowing money and was it the right time to invest. It's actually proven to be quite successful so far. So let's hope it continues that way. There's no reason why it shouldn't. I just wondered, I mean, let's see Mr. Brooks here. In the last property we bought was September 2019. I just wondered what is the appetite? Go out looking for further properties. Are we still being informed of further properties up for sale? I know, you know, officers are all very busy at the moment with COVID and catch up and many other things. But does this council, are we still being informed about possible properties that we could invest in? And is there an appetite really amongst certainly among the leadership team to actually look into further investments?
Thank you, Councillor Davis. A question I asked this morning. Mr. Brook.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we did discuss it this morning, and we are being appraised of opportunities, but they're not filtered. They're just opportunities in the market. So most of them don't meet our criteria, i.e., they're geographically not located in the right place, or they're, you know, if you look around, there is something for sale at the moment in Oakhampton, but we wouldn't want it. Sorry, but there's like one thing. Do you know what I mean? So absolutely, we're having a look. And we had a conversation about members and their role in this. And of course, I would just say if anybody, you know, has relationships with businesses and they're thinking of expanding their operations, they need new premises. I want to know from a placemaking and economy perspective. And if they're looking to release their old premises, I'm interested in, you know, again, for the same reasons, but we would all be interested in whether there's an opportunity for the council to step in there. So yes, we're looking, just nothing has come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brook. As always, never sitting on the fence. Thank you. I mean, I think, you know, one of the comments I made this morning, and probably some of the Councillor Davies thought about as well, is that, you know, obviously with a railway to Oakhampton, you know, it might attract opportunities that we don't see yet in the future. And I think, you know, I think it's wise that we just keep our eyes open, I think. So thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Davies. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Richards, please go ahead.
Thank you for bringing this paper forward. I know I've been pushing for some more insight into this area, and you know how we're doing, which is particularly well, really. I mean, it's one area I was particularly worried about when we went into COVID. I thought it would be mass defaults. Stopped worrying about that about sort of 6 months ago, and now I'm worried about it again as we get to the cost of living increase. But no, it's an excellent paper, and I think it gives us insight, just what we need to know on the audit committee of, you know, where we're committed and how well we're doing. Just one small question. I just noticed on 217 borrowing outturn, we've got an average of 2.54, and then we've got 145-year fixed interest rate, the Public Works and Loan Board of 4.55, which sort of sticks out a bit like a sore thumb. Is that a later borrowing rate?
Yeah.
I know they've been. I know it was too good to be true for too long with the Public Loan Works Board. So.
So the 45-year loan that was at the interest rate at the moment, 50-year PWLB borrowing has just gone over 4%, which is the highest it has been for years. Now, we are speaking to our Treasury Management Advisor about whether it's expected they will start coming back down again. And I think it's an unknown at the moment. But that would also mean that, you know, when we are looking at investment opportunities, if the rates are as high as that at the moment, I mean, when we were borrowing, it was around about the 2% mark. It would make future investments quite challenging to be financially viable at that level of interest rate. But that doesn't mean to say they won't drop in the future, and we are very much keeping an eye on daily PWLB rates. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that's a really good point, because actually, return 1.94% is tight. And anyone who's listening to property tight, so some solid investments in city tighter still, really. See what comes up. Thank you. Really good paper. Thanks.
Thank you. I echo Councillor Ridge's point. It is a good paper, and obviously it's very pleasing to see that, you know, the income is as, you know, high as 96. Well, just 96 and a bit %. So that's very encouraging, and I think again the points that Councillor Ridge has made about the backdrop of the difficulties around COVID and potentially difficulties around cost of living are valid and why these reports are important to, for us to keep an eye on things. Councillor Evans, did you want to come back on that?
Just one further observation, when we were considering the internal audit progress update, I couldn't help noticing that the comment on assets investment strategy was of substantial assurance. And I think that really underpins what you're seeing in that report. So it's very encouraged by that. In other words, what's happening behind the scenes, the due diligence, the management and so on, I think is sound, which it has to be in order to effectively manage our portfolio and the associated risk. It's interesting, the interest rate on Kilby, 4.5, that's almost starting to look competitive now. When we were talking about 2.36, that looked somewhat out of step, and who made that decision? Suddenly, it's not sticking out quite so much as it was, so it's quite interesting. But it's really, it's good, but I'm touching wood, and we're never complacent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. I think that's a very, really good point, and I think it reflects on the processes that we have in place. And I think it's appropriate that we thank the team for the good work that's been done on that so far. And obviously, it's an income that we get that. As Councillor Davis pointed out, if we hadn't gone ahead with that, we wouldn't have had that income. So I think it's a positive for us as an authority. Thank you very much. Any other comments before we go to the recommendation? No. Okay. In that case, I think we just need to note this paper. Noted. Thank you. Thank you, members. I believe that's it. So I'll close the meeting at 14:20. Thank you very much for your attendance.